Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
Well, good morning. Do you ever have those times when you're sailing along through life? Sometimes you might be in a process of grieving, or else everything's going fine, and something will just trigger the tears, and you don't even know why. The reason I'm saying this is that last week we sang this beautiful song in worship. Just make sure I get the words of the chorus right. And the chorus was, "You are always, always with me." And so those who were there last week will remember this. If you want to look it up, it's in the Porter's Gate albums. But I had nothing special going on. And after we'd sung this a few times, that chorus, "You are always, always with me," I just found myself tearing up suddenly. And I thought, what is this about? So I sort of pulled a bit deeper into myself and thought about it. And I thought, it's just the amazing knowledge that is true. That is true in my life. And I have just recently attained 3/4 of a century, and through most of that life, I have known that God is with me. And that's a pretty amazing testimony, really. But I thought a bit more about it, and the word that came to me was repetition. So often, it's as we're repeating these words, on the surface, they don't sort of do a lot, but as we repeat them, as we have with some of these worship songs this morning, as we repeat, suddenly it's sort of like the water dripping through the soil. If you throw a bucket at it, it'll run off. A bucket of water, sorry. The water will run off the surface. But if you apply drips, as our gardeners will attest, it's more likely to penetrate, and so it comes deep down. All through the Old Testament, you'll find God instructing the children of Israel to repeat a whole lot of things, rituals, memorials, and these are so that they will remember. And even thanks to Kathleen, we've been instructed in the chiasm. And the chiasm itself, the chiastic structure, is repetition. It goes one way, and then it comes at it another way, and it's the same thing. And it's in order that the truth will go deep down. And we know from education that repetition is the way to learn. So if you keep repeating anything long enough, even untruths, you'll come to believe them. But how much more beautiful is it that we have the truths that we sang this morning and the truths that we read in the Bible, and those truths become a part of us. These truths about God that I've been knowing and repeating for 3/4 of a century nearly, you can't shake me from those. And so every week we come to the communion table at the end of the service. It's the focus really of our service. And we repeat this ritual, this sacrament, every week. And there's a very good reason for it. So I suggest to you this morning that if you've been coming to communion and it hasn't really meant a lot to you, the truth of what it represents hasn't really sunk down into your spirit yet, just keep doing it. Keep coming, because every week we invite you, God invites you to come to the table because it represents the truth of his great love for us, that Jesus came and died so that we might live. So this morning, as you come to communion at the end, and we will have gluten-free options at the front as well, but as you take the bread that represents the body of Jesus and you drink from the cup that represents his blood that was poured out for us, just think on that and allow the truth of it to penetrate down, so that that becomes a part of your life, if it hasn't already, so that you are able to live the life that God intended you to live. Thank
you. I just can't teach without a whiteboard, so that's always my way. And who was here last week and saw Kai do that magnificent reveal with the whiteboard? Now, Kai gave me a bunch of credit, and it is true, I did sit down with Kai and talk Bible at him. If anybody ever asks me to talk Bible at them, I will. So it's very rare that people actually invite me to do that. But he went away and he did all that research, and he actually came up with that whole chiastic structure that he did the big reveal on the board. I was so excited. I don't know if you can tell, but I was like, yes, this is really, I was just delighted. And he was the one who went and did a lot of that research. And everything that I talked to him about actually didn't come from me anyway. So credit where credit's due. I got it all from the Bible Project. So who here has heard of the Bible Project? If you haven't heard of it, it's because I haven't told you about it yet. My bad. Honestly, there is this thing called the Bible Project, and if you haven't heard of it, if you are at all interested in the Bible, if the Bible doesn't make sense to you, as it doesn't to most of us, it's all free. That's the magnificent thing. So you can download the app, you can go to the YouTube channel, you can go straight to the website, whatever you want. And if you just want short and sweet, you can watch 5-minute videos. If you want to listen to stuff on your way to work, there's podcasts. And if you want to go full nerd, there are classes that you can do for free. It's like having a really high quality Bible college education, absolutely for free. And they've just released a whole series on pretty much the messy people of Genesis. So I've just completed listening to the classroom of Joseph, and guess which story I get to do today? So I'm going full nerd. But I do really, really recommend that you all look at their resources. It's just such high quality. And if you do listen to Anything Bible Project, you'll find that they spend a lot of time going back to Genesis. Nearly pretty much any topic they talk about, they're going to start at Genesis. Because Genesis is the book of beginnings. Genesis is the start of a unified story that leads to Jesus. So the whole Bible, when you read it, it seems all over the place. It seems like there's bits and pieces and strange stories, and they don't seem to link together. But actually there's amazing artistry and amazing literary design all the way through. And every writer goes back to the major themes that are presented in Genesis. So if you think of it as a story, Genesis is the first chapter. Genesis is where all the narrative conflict is going to be set up. And it's also where, just like Kerry talked about repetition, it's where the scenes are going to start happening, the patterns are going to start happening to train us to listen to that for the rest of the Bible. So we're meant to be noticing the patterns, the scenes that come up again and again and again, because they're going to be repeated and they're going to be fulfilled. And we know how the story ends and it all works out okay. So that's the spoiler. But we've been looking at messy people in Genesis. And Genesis neatly actually divides into 4 sections. And so this is the 4th week that we're spending looking at Genesis. So we started in week 1 with Tara. And Tara had the hardest job of all in a way, because chapters 1 to 11 of Genesis are quite bizarre, quite weird. It's like this montage of strange scenes. And they're very dark, because this is establishing the setup for the rest of the Bible. This is establishing the setting and the narrative conflict. And I want to zoom in on 3 scenes in that first section, because you're going to see how these scenes are replayed, not just through Genesis, but through the entire Bible. So the first scene I want to come back to, and Tara spoke about this, is the tree. So you've got this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and for some reason God has said, that's off limits. I don't want you to take from that and eat of it. Now, did God actually want to deprive us of the knowledge of good and evil? No way. The entire Bible is this process of us developing a knowledge of good and evil. But he did say, don't go taking that on your own terms. Don't go taking what's good in your own eyes. But the voice of the snake got in the ear of Adam and Eve as they looked at that tree. And he said, did God really say? Does God really have your best interests in heart? Is he actually trying to keep something really special from you that you could take on your own terms? And this is the verse that is very significant. When the woman saw with her eyes that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. So just in case you think it's all Eve's fault and Adam wasn't involved, like he's totally complicit, he's part of the whole thing too. And then their eyes were opened. So there's a lot of discussion about eyes. There's a lot of, if you see the basic formula, she saw it, she wanted it, she took it, she ate it, she gave it. And you start to have a scene set in motion that is going to be repeated again and again. The next scene happens straight after that. And I've got a woman here and a snake, because God gives some warnings and some hope. Because it turns out the book of Genesis is actually a prophetic book looking to the future, looking to our hope. So he warns the snake. He says, I will put enmity between the seed of the woman, between you and the woman, and between her offspring and yours. And he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. You could read right over it. It's a strange little verse. It doesn't seem to make sense. But when you read the rest of the Bible, you start to get this increasing, this repetition that there's one coming, and we think of it as the seed of the woman from this verse. So somebody's coming. There's a woman involved. There's someone coming who is going to crush that serpent, that evil, that and the snake can mean a lot of different things if we there's a lot to meditate on there of what that snake might be. So this is an image that comes up again and again because the rest of the Old Testament is essentially a family tree of how the seed of that woman is protected and brought to us today. So, and it's constantly in danger because the snake is out to get it. But the ironic thing is the snake is often the people of God themselves. And the heroes who rescue the seed of the woman are often outsiders. So it's not always that the snake is some kind of spiritual being, some external force. The people of God, the messy people, often take on that role of the snake. So there's another scene to have in your head as we work through Genesis. And the third scene is the deeply sad story. After Adam and Eve leave the garden, they have two sons. And their first son is called Cain. Now, the first son, the firstborn, is highly important in ancient cultures and even a lot of cultures today. People, hand over, like even think of the royal family, people hand on the responsibility to the firstborn. It's a very significant role. And then they have a second son, Abel. But God looks with favour on Abel and not on Cain. And this sets up a dynamic that you're going to see again and again and again in the Bible as well. God choosing the second-born, the lesser, choosing the weak to shame the strong, the poor to shame the rich. God seems to have this thing for the underdog. So he elevates the younger one over the older one. But it doesn't mean that the non-chosen isn't still loved by God. God actually says to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not also be accepted?" And in the Hebrew, it's actually, "Why is your face fallen down? If you do the right thing, you will still be lifted up." There's still space for the non-chosen line. Just because there's the seed of the woman doesn't mean people who are not chosen are not also part of the plan. It's always meant to be for all nations. But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door like a beast. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. And Cain does not rule over it. He kills his brother, the first murder, and God says to him, "What have you done?" And Cain says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And we hear that question echo through the rest of the Bible. So we've got these three key moments in that opening scenes. And I loved it when Tara said, "We are all Eve. We are all messy people. We are all standing in that tree, doubting whether God is good, sometimes making the right choice, sometimes making the wrong." Then we had the lovely Josh Potter, who's just had baby Joseph, and he shared about Abraham, this one person who's chosen out of a place of wildness and taken to the promised land. And you start to see these scenes repeat, because there is a tree moment where Abraham doubts that God's going to give him what he needs, what God has promised. So he seizes it and takes it for himself. And he and his wife abuse and oppress the Egyptian slave Hagar, and that is a tree moment. And both Sarah and Abraham, even though they're the chosen ones, they take on the snake imagery and they start to act like the snake. And then they set up this terrible, tragic conflict within their family where the older son, Ishmael, the unchosen, doesn't even get to grow up with his brother Isaac, the chosen one. And so you've got this broken, damaged, hurting family, and a very realistic portrait, something that probably all of us have experience with in life, the hurt and the conflict that happens. And then last week, Kai talked about the classic two-son situation, the twins, Esau and Jacob was chosen over Esau. And because they're twins, the ancients used to really think about the fact that twins were nearly like two halves of the one person. And so the conflict between them is nearly mirroring what happens within each of us, that we're all, to be at war with your brother is to be at war with yourself. And so Jacob's journey really explores how he doubts God and seizes the blessing for himself in tree-like moments. And Jacob is the ultimate snake. Everything he does is snaky. He's always full of lies and deceit. He's constantly tricking and grabbing what he needs. And then people trick him in return, and then he sets up this conflict between his own wives, and the cycles keep repeating. But there is this beautiful moment in the Jacob story where Jacob actually risks his life and comes together with Esau, and Esau throws his arms around him and weeps, and the two brothers are reconciled. So there's this beautiful taste of, we want more of that. And I get the best story of all, because I get to do the Joseph story. And Genesis comes in 4 parts. Joseph is the final part. So this is the grand finale. And as you would expect in a grand finale, this is where all the themes get resolved, where everything comes together, where the loose ends are tied up, where we get the beautiful, the end to the conflict and the resolution. So Joseph is the absolute classic youngest son, dialed up by 10 at least, because he's oppressed by 10 older brothers. He's dearly loved of his father, so he's elevated right from the beginning. He's the son of the beloved wife, so that elevates him over his brothers, who are all born of the lesser loved wives. And his father gives him a royal robe just to really rub it in the brothers' faces. So there's no doubt that he is elevated and loved in that family. And that turns his 10 older brothers against him. and they plot against him and they're going to kill him. They throw him in a pit, which in Bible language is very much like dying, going into the pit. And then they see some traders on the horizon, and it turns out the traders are also brothers in a sense, because they're Ishmaelites and Midianites. And if you look back, because this is all a family tree, you actually see that just a couple of generations ago, these are the sons of Abraham. So you've got the sons of Israel are against Joseph, the sons of Abraham are against Joseph, and then they sell him to the Egyptians. And if you trace the family tree far enough back, you find that those are the sons of Noah through Ham. And so you end up with all these generations, not just his own family, but the nations are all against him as well. So it's the ultimate, the one versus the many. It's the ultimate younger son who is oppressed, but then elevated and elevated. And by the end of the story, he ends up elevated over the nation of Egypt, and he's in a position to save Egypt and the nations and his own family. And so God actually elevates him above his brothers. So you've got all those elements at play. But constantly Joseph is contrasted to his brothers, because Joseph is clearly the son of the woman. He's loved by Rachel. He's the son of the beloved wife. And his brothers all are taking the role of the snake, but particularly one brother called Judah. And for some reason, the writers of Joseph have actually made it nearly a story of two brothers, not just of Joseph. At weird points in the story, Judah just keeps appearing. And Judah is the snakiest of all snakes. This guy is absolutely disgusting. So when the brothers throw Joseph in the pit, Judah says, "Oh, look, here come some traders. There is no money in murder. Let's make money out of our brother. Let's sell him and actually make some profit." And he literally sells him and just sits down to a meal, and then takes the robe home covered in blood of a goat and presents it to his father. And his father is in such grief that no one can comfort him. It's almost as if he dies in grief. And Judah shows no compassion whatsoever, doesn't care about his brother, doesn't care about his father. And you can think of those words, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Absolute carelessness towards others. And it gets worse, because there's a tree scene, and the contrast between Joseph and Judah gets heightened because there's two stories side by side. And whenever there's two stories side by side in the Bible, it's like, you should be paying attention. Look at the similarities and then look at the differences. So in Joseph's tree scene, Joseph goes into the house of Potiphar. He's elevated above everything. And Potiphar's wife decides, "Oh, I'm looking, I'm seeing, I like what I see, I want that." We're told he's very attractive. And she tries to seduce him. And Joseph flees. And we start to go, "Oh, this is one of the first portraits of anybody who's actually survived this tree test, who's actually trusted God." But right alongside that is a story of Judah. And this is possibly one of the grossest, weirdest, most uncomfortable stories for us as moderns to read. Also very difficult for us to understand because we don't come from the same cultural context. But Judah's story is really gross and really exposes what a snake-like heart he has. Because Judah leaves his brothers and goes off and marries a Canaanite woman. And in the Bible, you instinctively know, "Ooh, there's something wrong about that." We as moderns go, "Hold on a second. I'm not really comfortable with the Bible being all about racial purity. What's this, why are Canaanites so bad?" Well, it turns out it's not actually about racial purity at all. It's about spiritual purity. And in the Bible, we know from the context that it's written in that to marry a Canaanite woman is to be turning your back on the Father and on the God of your fathers. And sure enough, this marriage just results in 3 sons. The first 2 are definitely full of evil themselves, because the story tells us so. So that's leading to bad places already. The first son grows up, and Judah takes a wife to give to his first son, and her name is Tamar. Now, I wouldn't have known this except for the Bible Project, but Tamar is a type of tree. So just in case you don't, notice the connections, the writers are very careful to deliberately put signposts. And the first son dies because he's wicked. We don't know how that happens or exactly what the details are. We just know that he dies. And in that society, in that time, the relationship of Judah now to his daughter-in-law is he is the family patriarch. He must protect and preserve the life of his family. And so he gives his second son in marriage to Tamar to do what was expected in that culture, to allow her to have a son of her own so that the family line can be continued. Turns out the second son is even more of a jerk, and he's happy to sleep with her, but not to help her get pregnant, which is what she actually needs. And he also dies. I told you it was a weird story. And Judah wants to protect his family, so he deliberately lies to Tamar and says, when the third son is old enough, you can marry him. In the meantime, go home to your family. And so he actually heaps shame on her because it's his role to look after her within the family unit. Now, this is where the story gets really weird. And for us, as we're trying to work out who's being judged here, what's going on, because Tamar takes matters into her own hands. She dresses as a temple prostitute to do with idol worship and everything. And she obviously knows that this is Judah's weakness because she just sits at the side of the road, and when he walks past, the inevitable happens and he gets her pregnant. And you read that, and as a woman reading the Bible, I find I'm quite often left wondering, what are these roles that are given to women? Why are they so often in positions where they're being abused? Is there judgment on someone like Tamar for the actions that she has done? But if you're reading the text carefully, and if you're realising that there's clues in the text, so Tamar is the name of a tree, and the place where he meets Tamar, in Hebrew, if you translate it into English, it's called the opening of the eyes. And so you're starting to go, hold on, this is all Genesis 3 language. This is Judah taking what is not rightfully his. And Tamar, the tree, is portrayed as the innocent one. In fact, more than that, Tamar is actually the hero of the story because Judah's responsibility is to continue the life and the line of the woman. And Tamar is doing what needs to be done. And there's this moment where Judah turns up, ready to put his daughter-in-law to death because she's brought shame on the family. And she says, do you recognise these objects that you left in pledge? And again, his eyes are opened. It's Genesis 3 language. And he realises the snake nature and what he's done. And it becomes a transformation moment in Judah's life. And it also becomes a pivotal moment in the entire Bible because Tamar hasn't just saved Judah's line. She has saved the messianic line. Tamar becomes the mother, eventually, of King David. And she's praised and lifted up in the book of Ruth for her role. And not only that, she's in the lineage of Jesus. So when you get to Matthew chapter 1, the opening verses of the New Testament, Tamar's name is there, along with 4 other women who also have complex stories. She's an outsider. She's not even of the chosen line. She's of the non-chosen line. And yet she is bearing the seed of the woman that is going to crush the head of the snake. So Tamar plays this beautiful role in the story, totally unexpected and strange role, but she becomes the tree who confronts the snake, who actually crushes the head of the snake in a way, because from then on in the story, Judah, instead of behaving like Cain, who doesn't care or look after his brother, he ends up offering to lay down his life for his youngest brother, Benjamin. And he doesn't even know Joseph's true identity, but there's this incredible scene. I think it's always been my very favourite scene in the whole Bible. And if you've never read the story of Joseph, if you've never read anything in the Bible, I recommend reading this story of Joseph. It's so readable. It's like the best drama novella that you could read. It's full of drama, intrigue, mysteries, sex scandals, mistaken identity, all of the great elements of a really fun story. But there's this moment where Judah offers to lay down his life for his brother, and Joseph can't handle it anymore, and he takes off his mask. He reveals his true identity, and he says, it's me. The brother that you lost is now found. The brother that you thought was dead is alive. And there's this amazing reconciliation, not a short-term one like Esau and Jacob, but a full reunification of the 12 brothers and their father and all of their households. And Joseph gets to lead them into an Eden-like land where they can be in safety with all the food and animals and everything that they need. And so the story of Genesis and these highlight moments at the end of Genesis are actually prophetic because they're pointing forward. And both Joseph and Judah paint portraits that are partially realised in King David, but fully realised when Jesus comes. And Joseph paints that portrait of the one given for the many, of the suffering servant, of the one who is elevated to bring life and redemption to his brothers and to the nations and the whole earth, and to bring about full reconciliation of the brothers. And Judah paints that portrait, the redeemed, transformed Judah, laying down his life for his brother and bringing joy to the father's heart, because there's nothing as wonderful as when brothers live in unity. And my very favourite character would have to be Tamar, and all the messiness that she goes through. And I just love the fact that she is an outsider. She's not part of the chosen line, and yet she ends up grafted into the family. And I think that speaks to the New Testament, where the big dilemma in the New Testament is Jews and Gentiles, these brothers reconciling, and the fact that there is room for us, Gentiles. We're not part of the chosen line, but we get to be grafted in. And so we are all Eve at the tree, but we are all Tamar grafted into this great family.
How good was that message? Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at Westcity, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.